Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes ICJ hearings on Israel's occupation, what to know, Gaza to football, Brazil, Israel and a love-hate relationship. US stands with Israel at UN court as Biden-Netanyahu tension simmers. Israeli strike on Damascus flat kills 2, Syria. Amid food shortages, people in Gaza are ambushing aid convoys. ICJ hearings on Israel's occupation, what to know, Washington Post. The International Court of Justice, ICJ, is holding a 6-day hearing into the legal consequences of Israel's policies and practices in the occupied Palestinian territory. The hearings are in response to a 2022 resolution from the UN General Assembly, and will look at the legal consequences of Israel's prolonged occupation, settlement and annexation of the Palestinian territories, as well as its adoption of discriminatory legislation and measures. Palestinian officials have called on the court to rule that Israeli occupation is illegal. Israel has said that it does not recognize the legitimacy of the hearings and will not attend. The U.S. is expected to speak on Wednesday. Around 50 countries, as well as the African Union, the Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, are expected to participate in the hearings. The hearings are expected to result in an advisory opinion from the court, which will then be up to the UN General Assembly to give effect to or not. Gaza to football, Brazil, Israel and a love-hate relationship. Al Jazeera. Brazil has recalled its ambassador to Israel and refused to retract statements about Israel's war on Gaza that the Israeli government has called anti-Semitic. Tensions between the two countries have escalated, with Brazil denouncing Israel's attacks on civilians and infrastructure in Gaza. Brazil has been vocal about its support for a ceasefire in Gaza at the United Nations Security Council, while also calling for the creation of a Palestinian state. However, the relationship between Brazil and Israel has been strained in the past, particularly during the 2014 Gaza war when Brazil criticized Israel's actions and recalled its ambassador for diplomatic talks. U.S. stands with Israel at UN court as Biden-Netanyahu tension simmers. Washington Post. The U.S. has backed Israel in a hearing in The Hague, as the International Court of Justice considers the country's control over the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. U.S. officials warned that an advisory opinion that did not account for Israel's security needs could hamper peace efforts. The U.S. remains Israel's closest ally, but has been increasingly criticized for its support as the war with Gaza has intensified. In a separate development, UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan has criticized Israel for violating Lebanon's sovereignty with its recent airstrikes. Israeli strike on Damascus flat kills 2, Syria. BBC. 2 people were killed in a missile strike in Damascus, Syria. The Syrian military claimed that 2 civilians died when several missiles hit a block of flats in the Kafr Sousa district. However, a monitoring group reported that 2 foreigners and a Syrian civilian were killed in the strike and that the area was frequented by senior figures from Iran's Revolutionary Guards and Lebanese group Hezbollah. The Israeli military, who have previously carried out strikes on targets in Syria that they say are linked to Iran and allied armed groups, has not commented on the incident. Amid food shortages, people in Gaza are ambushing aid convoys. New York Times. The New York Times reports that groups of desperate civilians in Gaza are regularly attacking aid convoys in an attempt to steal food supplies. The food shortages have become a major problem since Israel's invasion last year, with civilians facing starvation in certain areas of the enclave. The Western officials, who spoke on condition of anonymity, say that the attacks are organized by groups of unaffiliated Gazans, rather than Hamas, and are partly due to a breakdown in law enforcement. The Gazan police are refusing to protect the convoys as they fear being targeted by Israel because of their affiliation with Hamas. Foreign diplomats say that enough food is reaching the border with Egypt to prevent famine, but the problem lies in its distribution to areas beyond Rafah in southern Gaza, and also coordinating safe passage with the Israeli military. In the north of Gaza, which is under full Israeli control, aid groups say that Israel regularly blocks access to Gaza City and its surrounding districts. The Israeli government says that the aid groups have not coordinated their convoys closely enough with them, and that not all requests for access can be granted due to continued fighting. Israel's Druze Arabs, fiercely loyal to the state, feel let down after paying with their blood. CNN. The Druze community in Israel, Lebanon, and Syria is known for its strong sense of national pride and loyalty to the countries in which its members live. In Israel, the Druze have a long-standing tradition of serving in the military, with Druze men over 18 being conscripted into the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, since 1957. Many Druze soldiers rise to high ranks within the IDF and build careers in the police and security forces. However, tensions have arisen within the community due to Israel's controversial nation-state law, which critics argue fails to mention equality or minority rights. There have also been issues surrounding planning laws, which have led to the demolition of Arab property and the imposition of massive fines. Despite these tensions, the Druze community has chosen to unite and fight in the face of an existential threat to Israel. The community has put aside its differences and shown solidarity during times of conflict, opening their homes to evacuees and cooking for soldiers on the front lines. However, the tensions within the community have not disappeared, and many Druze feel a sense of disillusionment with the Israeli government. Calls for an amendment of the nation-state law and other reforms have been made, but some argue that a stronger democracy is needed to ensure equality for all citizens. The Druze feel that they pay with blood and should be better taken care of by the government. The widow of a fallen Druze soldier expressed her disappointment with the government, stating that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu only cares about himself. She called on politicians to act for the Druze people and amend the laws surrounding national identity and building regulations. Iran accuses Israel of sabotage attack that saw explosions strike natural gas pipeline. Associated Press. Iran's oil minister, Javad Oji, has claimed that an Israeli sabotage attack on an Iranian natural gas pipeline caused the explosions that hit it a week ago. This comes as Israel has been blamed for a series of attacks targeting Tehran's nuclear program. The Israeli government has not confirmed or denied that they were responsible for the attack. The explosion on February 14 hit a natural gas pipeline running from Iran's western Kahramanmahal and Bakhtiari province up north to cities on the Caspian Sea. Sudan's refugee crisis. Foreign policy. Sudan is experiencing the world's fastest unfolding refugee crisis, with almost 8 million people having fled their homes since fighting broke out between the military and the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, paramilitary group in April 2023. Aid agencies warn that Sudan's needs are competing for attention with conflicts in the Gaza Strip and Ukraine, and current funding is woefully insufficient to help the 25 million Sudanese who are in dire need of humanitarian assistance. The United Nations, UN, has described the situation as a competition of suffering and has called for urgent action from the international community. Sudanese refugees have fled to neighboring Chad and Egypt, putting pressure on these countries' resources and infrastructure. The impact on neighboring countries is not sustainable, and there are concerns that the conflict in Sudan could escalate and regionalize. The RSF has made significant gains in the conflict, seizing towns and cities in Sudan's breadbasket state of Jazeera. The involvement of external actors, such as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Iran, has further complicated the situation. The UN has appealed for more serious international diplomacy to bring an end to the conflict and prevent further regional destabilization. In other news, Senegal's top court has overturned President Macky Sall's decision to postpone the country's presidential election. The court has ordered Sall to quickly organize elections and step down by April 2, when his mandate ends. However, opposition leader Ousmane Sonko and his chosen presidential candidate, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, remain in prison. Meanwhile, Kenya's President William Ruto is reportedly backing Raila Odinga's bid to become the chairman of the African Union Commission next year, which would prevent Odinga from running in Kenya's 2027 presidential election. Ship abandoned in Red Sea faces unknown fate, sources. Yahoo! The Belize-flagged Ruby Mar cargo ship, which was abandoned 4 days ago after being hit by missiles fired by Houthi rebels in Yemen, is still floating, despite taking in water. The vessel's operators are considering towing the ship to nearby Djibouti, the only option for repairs, according to 2 sources in the shipping and insurance industry. Red Sea and Bab al-Mandab Strait shipping risks have increased since the Houthis began missile and drone attacks in November. Several US and UK strikes on Houthi facilities have failed to stop the attacks. Israeli air strikes kills 2 people in Syria's capital, state media. Al Jazeera. Israeli airstrikes in the Syrian capital, Damascus, have killed at least 2 people. The attack took place in an area with a number of security and military headquarters. Israel has not confirmed the strikes. Videos on social media showed an apartment on fire in a multi-story building, with windows shattered in nearby buildings and parked cars damaged. An empty bus for a nearby school was also damaged. The neighborhood is home to residential buildings and Iranian cultural centers. Syrian state TV did not say who was killed. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the strikes were a result of a new Israeli targeting of Syrian territory. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6th dimension, bringing you the latest news from around the world. Today, we discuss the ongoing ICJ hearings on Israel's occupation, tensions between Brazil and Israel over Gaza, the U.S.'s support for Israel at the UN court, an Israeli strike in Damascus, food shortages in Gaza, the Druze community's loyalty to Israel, Iran accusing Israel of sabotage, Sudan's refugee crisis, and Israeli airstrikes in Syria. Let's dive into these stories, shall we? The ICJ hearings on Israel's policies and practices in the occupied Palestinian territory are a significant development. While Israel has refused to attend, over 50 countries and international organizations are participating. The outcome of these hearings could have far-reaching consequences for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In other news, tensions between Brazil and Israel have escalated over Brazil's criticism of Israel's actions in Gaza. Brazil's decision to recall its ambassador and its support for a Palestinian state have strained relations between the two countries. This love-hate relationship between Brazil and Israel is certainly an intriguing dynamic to watch. Meanwhile, the U.S. has backed Israel at the ICJ hearings, emphasizing the importance of Israel's security needs. As the U.S.'s support for Israel faces increasing criticism, this move highlights the complexities of the U.S.-Israel relationship. We also discussed an Israeli strike in Damascus, which resulted in casualties. The details of this incident are still unclear, but it is another example of the ongoing tensions and conflicts in the region. Additionally, we touched upon the dire food shortages in Gaza and the desperate measures some civilians are resorting to, including attacking aid convoys. This highlights the humanitarian crisis in the region and the need for coordinated efforts to ensure food reaches those in need. Furthermore, we explored the loyalty of Israel's Druze community and their disillusionment with the government. The Druze community has historically been fiercely loyal to Israel, but tensions have arisen over controversial laws and property demolitions. It is a reminder that even within communities that have shown unwavering support, there can be underlying grievances and calls for change. Moving on, Iran has accused Israel of sabotage in an attack on an Iranian natural gas pipeline. This accusation adds to the ongoing tensions between the two countries and the wider context of attacks on Iran's nuclear program. We also discussed Sudan's refugee crisis, which is unfolding at an alarming rate. The international community must respond urgently to address the dire humanitarian situation and prevent further destabilization in the region. Finally, a cargo ship abandoned in the Red Sea after being hit by Houthi missiles in Yemen faces an uncertain fate. The escalating conflicts in the region have increased shipping risks, and efforts are being made to salvage the vessel. That wraps up our news for today. It's clear that the conflicts and tensions in the Middle East continue to have far-reaching consequences. As always, I encourage you, our viewers, to share your thoughts and questions. What are your thoughts on these stories? Let's start a discussion. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.